hppodcraft.com.
All right.
I saw him on a sleepless night when I was walking desperately to save my soul and my vision. My coming to New York had been a mistake. For whereas I had looked for poignant wonder and inspiration in the teeming labyrinths of ancient streets that twist endlessly from forgotten courts and squares and waterfronts to courts and squares and waterfronts equally forgotten, and in the cyclopean modern towers and pinnacles that rise blackly Babylonian under waning moons, I had found instead only a sense of horror and oppression which threatened to master, paralyze, and annihilate me.
That was the first paragraph from H.P. Lovecraft's short story, He, the story of a man who has moved and regrets it.
Wow. You know, I'm a man who's recently moved.
But you don't regret it, hopefully.
Don't you want to know who I am as a man?
Oh, yeah, as a man, I want to know who you are as a human being. Who are you?
My name's Chris Lackey. And who are you?
Well, hi, Chris. I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
And this is the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
We're at hppodcraft.com.
As I was saying, I have just moved. I am in northern England, in Yorkshire right now.
All right.
Our regular listeners may notice that things have changed slightly on the site. We have got a new member of our team here at the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, Mike Mann.
Yeah, our site has moved to a new hosting service, so there's a redesign. We'll have all of the old comments and forum posts up at some point, but right now it's still a work in progress. Thanks, everybody, for your patience while we were making that move.
Yes, yeah, we're working on it, so it'll be... Hopefully, maybe by the time this is this goes live, it'll be already set. And also another thing, you might have to subscribe through iTunes because it's since we're moved over with hosting, there might be a problem with that. So you'll have to go through and resubscribe through iTunes.
Which, if you listen to this show on iTunes, you probably aren't getting that message that's telling you to do that.
Right.
So, hopefully, you'll investigate on your own. That reader was Andrew Lehman.
Oh, yes.
And, so much moving and changing. We've got another addition to the family, even. It's Troy Sterling Neese, who was nice enough to lend us some of his music to use in future episodes.
Yep.
You might know Troy's work from the Call of Cthulhu silent film, which he scored. He's got the upcoming Whisper in Darkness, I think he did as well.
Oh, yep. He did the music for the trailer. So the trailer's up, and you guys can check that out and hear some of his stuff. So
yeah, we'll put a link up to that. We're very lucky to have him contribute some music to the show.
Yeah. So let's enjoy some of that right now.
So Lovecraft didn't like New York, huh?
No. Lovecraft didn't like, now Lovecraft, of course, moved there with his wife, Sonia, who he met at a literary conference in Boston. They were married after a courtship of a few years, and he decided to just get up and move to New York to be with her, and he didn't like it at all. He was he thought it was kind of filled with foreigners and trouble, and we get a really good insight into how he really felt about New York City in this particular story. Yeah, and
I mean, he just blurts it out there in that first paragraph. My coming to New York had been a mistake.
Yeah.
I love in that first paragraph. I like how he says courts and squares forgotten to courts and squares equally forgotten. That's some lazy writing, man. He then went on to courts that two people remembered, but one person could only slightly recall.
So anyway, the protagonist of the story, the narrator, who we don't ever really get a name of, he is a guy who's recently moved to New York, not unlike Lovecraft, and is just trying to make his way in this, the city.
Yeah, he wants to be a poet.
Yes, and so he figures moving to Greenwich Village is the place to be because that's where all the cool people live. That's where the hipsters are.
Yeah, it says...
But success and happiness were not to be. Garish daylight showed only squalor and alienage and the noxious elephantiasis of climbing, spreading stone, where the moon had hinted of loveliness and elder magic. And the throngs of people that seethed through the flume-like streets were squat, swarthy strangers with hardened faces and narrow eyes, shrewd strangers without dreams and without kinship to the scenes about them, who could never mean aught to a blue-eyed man of the old folk, with the love of fair green lanes and white New England village steeples in his heart.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What an asshole.
Yeah, he's really a jerk in this. It's
I mean, it's funny because people talk about horror at Red Hook like that's such a racist story, but just that one paragraph there actually offended me more than that whole Red Hook story. You know, how can he say that these people don't have dreams?
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. And I think it really gets all summed up in this.
I saw at last a fearful truth which no one had ever dared to breathe before. The unwhisperable secret of secrets. The fact that this city of stone and strider is not a sentient perpetuation of old New York as London is of old London and Paris of old Paris, but that it is in fact quite dead, its sprawling body imperfectly embalmed and infested with queer animate things which have nothing to do with it as it was in life.
Jesus. God.
What? It's so funny because, you know, has he been to London or Paris?
No, Lovecraft has not been to London or Paris. And so he has no idea what he's talking about. It's just stupid. It's just,
yeah, it is.
You know, ignorance and I mean, gosh, to say that that the city is dead and embalmed.
Yeah, it's a corpse.
Oh my God. It's just... What a jerk. I mean, this story really...
I know.
It was hard to get past all this stuff and get to the actual story because this is obviously Lovecraft. Like, it really has nothing...
Yeah.
You know.
And then finally, in the next paragraph, he does set up the actual story.
Then, on a sleepless night's walk, I met the man. It was in a grotesque hidden courtyard of the Greenwich section. For there, in my ignorance, I had settled, having heard of the place as the natural home of poets and artists. The archaic lanes and houses and unexpected bits of square and court had indeed delighted me, and when I found the poets and artists to be loud-voiced pretenders, whose quaintness is tinsel, and whose lives are a denial of all that pure beauty which is poetry and art, I stayed on for love of these venerable things.
So basically, he's that paragraph is hilarious. Because I just imagine that he's mad that all these people are having so much fun. You know? I mean, to an extent, I understand what he's saying. I mean, he thought there'd be all these artists there, and then it's just like coffee shop bohemians, you know,
right.
who are full of it. But also, I just imagine they're out late drinking and carousing and actually enjoying life, and he's like, humph.
Yeah, these jerks out having fun while I'm sitting here miserable.
Don't they know what art is?
Yeah,
they're into the wee hours of the night. They're drinking and carousing, and he's wandering around alone, looking at doorknobs from the past. You know, that's basically.
Yeah, well,
which is what his habit becomes, right? He starts walking around looking for old, antiquated sections of
right. Yeah, just things that are old and that will, you know. I guess he's trying to look for those last vestiges of life that may be in the city, murder sites,
right?
Of what he has New York, you know, used to be and should be, and he's trying to find those things.
Yeah. Well, so he wanders around in the middle of the night to do this because he finds that there's fewer, you know, probably immigrants to bother him. I don't know. But he goes on to tell you who this man was that he met. He's out walking and he's rambling in some forgotten courts when he comes across this thin man with a soft, hollow voice. He's wearing this cloak and this out-of-date, wide-brimmed hat. And the guy basically says, hey, you know, I noticed you're an appreciator of the past. Why don't you let me guide you around to some even more forgotten courts?
Yeah.
And so, of course, our protagonist is way into that.
Yeah.
And the guy starts leading them around through all these oldie-timey neighborhoods in different parts of the city. Once they even have to crawl, he says.
Right.
It's like some kind of, you know, architectural haunted house or something.
It's not unlike your walking tour you did in London of the Jack the Ripper murder sites.
Yeah, I took that Jack the Ripper walking tour in Whitechapel in London. It was really fun. There's a guy with a big, crazy, you know, 1890s mustache, and he led us around. And
didn't he have like a deerstalker cap and like a cloak? Yeah.
Yeah, he was very dramatic, and you know, it was the middle of the night when we took the tour. I love stuff like that. I really do. But at one point, I did fall asleep standing up. I was so tired from the trip.
Wow. Well, you were probably jet lagged.
I was jet lagged. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was tired. How are you? You've overcome your jet lag now.
Oh yeah. It's been a couple weeks. Sorry for that hiatus also that we had for the week there, folks, while we were trying to get everything shipped around. Yeah, but no, I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. I feel acclimated, and there you go.
This guy is starting to get a little confused as he's being led around by this man that he met. Finally, the man leads him to this alley that runs steeply uphill, and our guy's like, I didn't know that they had hills this steep in New York, you know? and everything's only lit by these sort of oldie-timey colonial lanterns. And at the upper end of the street, of the alley, there's the wall of an estate, which the man leads him through, the gate of the wall.
Right.
And the man takes him to a house, into this huge library room. And I found it funny that the Lovecraft stand-in, the protagonist, was just like, oh, this guy's taking me to a house, that's cool, no big deal. Yeah. He's not creeped out at all.
No. This guy's wearing a cloak. Well, I mean, he's in old-timey stuff, and, he's a kindred soul, so I guess... this kind of reminds me of Hypnos.
Yeah.
A little bit. You know how when he sees the guy laying in the train station, they, like, lock eyes, and then they just understand each other. It's kind of like that same sort of thing.
Right, well it is, because, I mean, that was a little more of a love story, whereas this just seems like an anonymous hookup. Like, this really had this kind of, I don't know, they kind of make some signals to each other in a dark alley and then follow each other up to this house. And I was just like, what's going on here? And then it gets really cool. The guy takes him into the house and into this huge library room. And then this happens.
Before seating himself across the table from me, my host paused for a moment as if in embarrassment. Then, tardily removing his gloves, wide-brimmed hat, and cloak, stood theatrically revealed in full mid-Georgian costume, from queued hair and neck ruffles to knee breeches, silk hose, and the buckled shoes I had not previously noticed. Now, slowly sinking into a lyre-back chair, he commenced to eye me intently.
The guy throws off his cloak and reveals this costume he's wearing. He's so funny.
Yeah, he's got a 1700s costume that underneath his cloak that he walks around in. Yeah. It's so creepy. It's like,
I know, but he's like, I can show you this. I'm gonna reveal myself to you.
Well, yeah, but it just feels like a creepy, like you said, it's like a creepy hookup. And then when they get back to his place, he's like, yeah, check it out. I'm in a cosplay. Hopefully you're up for that.
Totally.
So this guy is wearing an outfit.
I mean, he's completely fetishized the 18th century, the way that Lovecraft
right. But our protagonist seems to be finds it curious, but not, he's not running out of it.
Yeah, and the guy even says, okay, I dress like this, but I'm not all queenie about it, so what's the big deal? This is just, what I do around the house, basically. And the protagonist is like, that's cool, man. So the guy in the costume says, I've had the luck of overseeing this estate, which belonged to my ancestors, and it dates back to the 18th century. And that's the time and the era I prefer, so that's why I dress this way, and this is why I live this way. And he says that his ancestor who had founded the estate practiced some strange arts and made some strange discoveries related to that.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely, yeah. But we're not exactly sure what those are, at least at this point in the story.
Right. He says, I'm going to show you some stuff. And basically he said, here's what happened. My ancestor thought that men could have dominion over everything. And he saw these Indians on the property doing some magical stuff, and he told them that they could continue to roam the grounds if they told him about them.
Right.
And they did. And then they all drank some bad rum.
Yeah.
Right? So it's totally that, here's some blankets with some smallpox on them, Right? Am I reading it right?
Yeah,
right. I don't think they actually... it's not an accident.
He doesn't know whether or not that his ancestor killed them intentionally or they just had bad rum.
But he probably killed them. I mean, I think, he stole their magical secrets and then killed them. Well, as the man tells this to our protagonist, his speech gets more and more antiquated with each paragraph. He says that his ancestor took this learning he got from the Indians and he sort of added things he learned from these intellects at Oxford and a chemist in Paris, and that his point of view is that reality is but a puff of smoke, and that a man can make out of the world whatever he desires. So this guy is very much so like Crawford Tillinghast or any of Lovecraft's sort of megalomaniacal... Actually, the guy in Hypnos was like that as well, right? He wanted to have dominion over the world. Exactly. It's the Faustian kind of, the guy who wants all this power, and you just know he's going to get punished. He's going to get punished for it.
Yeah. There's a price, and then he's going to have to pay it. Yeah. At some point.
So to illustrate that a man can have, dominion over what he sees in the world, he says, come here and look at this window.
Yeah.
I want to show you something.
My host now took my hand to draw me to one of the two windows on the long side of the malodorous room, and at the first touch of his ungloved fingers, I turned cold. His flesh, though dry and firm, was of the quality of ice, and I almost shrank away from his pulling. But again I thought of the emptiness and horror of reality, and boldly prepared to follow whithersoever I might be led. Once at the window, the man drew apart the yellow silk curtains and directed my stare into the blackness outside. For a moment I saw nothing save a myriad of tiny dancing lights far, far before me. Then, as if in response to an insidious motion of my host's hand, a flash of heat lightning played over the scene, and I looked out upon a sea of luxuriant foliage. Foliage unpolluted, and not the sea of roofs to be expected by any normal mind. On my right, the Hudson glittered wickedly, and in the distance ahead I saw the unhealthy shimmer of a vast salt marsh constellated with nervous fireflies. The flash died, and an evil smile illumined the waxy face of the aged necromancer. That was before my time, before the new squire's time. Pray let us try again.
So that's pretty trippy.
Yeah, he opens up the window, and it doesn't have modern New York there. It has an ancient marsh.
Yeah.
A swamp, which New York used to be.
Right.
Was built on. New York was built on. One of the things, too, that this is something that Lovecraft probably knew, is that the Indians of the area were I'm not sure how this is pronounced,
That's never stopped us from taking a swing at it.
Sappohonican? Sappohonican?
I don't know.
The Sappohonican Indians. The Sappohonican Indians. I could be saying that totally wrong, but those were the guys that were at that point. And from what it looks like, Lovecraft knew that there were Indians, in New York City before then. So he was probably taking on, some of his knowledge that he had of this and incorporated into the story, which it's something Lovecraft likes to do, take real historical events and kind of weave them into the stories, as we saw in the Shunned House. You
pronouncing that wrong probably means that tonight, as you're in bed, you're going to hear the padding of moccasin feet going up the stairs. Well, the man, he smiles through. He says he has these yellowed fangs almost. He says, well, I didn't. That was too far back, Let me show you something else. And he opens the curtain on the window again, and he shows Greenwich. It's an actual town, the town of Greenwich, before it was sort of ruined by modernity.
Right.
It looks very nice to Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And then the Lovecraft stand-in, and he says, well, can you go far? Meaning, can you go into the future?
Yeah.
And show me something?
Far? What I have seen would blast you to a mad statue of stone. Back, back, forward, forward, look, you puling lackwit. And as he snarled the phrase under his breath, he gestured anew, bringing to the sky a flash more blinding than either which had come before. For full 3 seconds I could glimpse that pandemoniac sight, and in those seconds I saw a vista which will ever afterward torment me in dreams. I saw the heavens verminous with strange flying things, and beneath them a hellish black city of giant stone terraces, with impious pyramids flung savagely to the moon, and devil lights burning from unnumbered windows. And swarming loathsomely on aerial galleries, I saw the yellow, squint-eyed people of that city, robed horribly in orange and red, and dancing insanely to the pounding of fevered kettle drums, the clatter of obscene crotala, and the maniacal moaning of muted horns whose ceaseless dirges rose and fell undulantly like the waves of an unhallowed ocean of bitumen.
Yeah. So this is kind of an apocalyptic vision of New York City, obviously.
Yeah, with Asians everywhere.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, that's what he's saying, basically.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he's basically saying the whole place is going to be overrun by foreigners, and it will just make not only the city, probably the whole world, an apocalyptic wasteland.
Right.
which is stupid, because Asia is full of many great civilizations.
Well, yeah.
What's the problem? Like Lovecraft, he's just such a bloomin' idiot.
I know.
This story makes me so angry. It's just so stupid.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to have a window that you can look around. That reminded me of sort of at the end of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, when he's just kind of running around through all these different futures, and he keeps seeing stranger and stranger things. In fact, there's a very Lovecraftian part of that. It's been a long time since I read it, but I remember he goes forward into the future, and he's on a beach, and there's just this thing sort of flopping along the beach that's horrible to look at.
Right. I remember
that. He
that.
jumps back into the time machine and gets out of there.
Yeah. I remember that. There's a lot of cool things in that story. But this actually, there's a Dunsany story, The Chronicles of Rodriguez, where there's this whole window in New York City where you can see the future and the past. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, Lovecraft totally ripped that off. Like, he ripped off a story and then wrote a bunch of, xenophobic crap, basically. I know we're not done with this yet. I know we're not there yet, but I'm so mad right now.
Well, speak your mind about it, certainly. I will say that right here, the comeuppance happens, and that's when the story gets really cool to me. Because basically the man in his little 18th century costume, he pushed it too far by showing this future vision, which makes our protagonist, of course our protagonist gets all fainty and screamy when he sees the thing. And then they hear moccasin footsteps coming up the stairs. And the man starts saying, "You called them, they're coming for me." He's saying, "I didn't poison your rum. I was just keeping the magic safe for you guys. Come on." And then we get a bit of an action sequence. The old man, he tears down the curtain and moonlight floods into the library. Mm-hmm. And when the moonlight comes in, the man gets older and the room gets mustier. Right. It's almost like it rots in the light of the moon.
Like something like maybe the magic of it was keeping it, fresh and new.
Right.
And maybe this guy isn't actually the ancestor. He might actually be the guy because he's
exactly.
Made himself live longer.
Right, and
through magic.
Exactly. I think that is the case. I think he's probably the actual guy. And again, you have that moon having this powerful magical effect on characters in Lovecraft stories.
Right.
Then there's a rapping on the door to the library, and then the crash of the wood paneling as tomahawks start splitting through the door. Tomahawks! That's so great. That is so great.
Oh boy.
I mean, I think it's so cool that Indian spirits come in and kick everybody's ass.
Yeah, I do like that. I'm a big fan of the Native American. I mean, I'm gonna admit it. I've got a bit of the white guilt. There's especially the Native American people. There's just no way to come correct with that. You know what I mean?
I know.
It's just.
I understand what you mean with the white guilt. Although a lot of the time I think we're just here now. This is the world as it is, and you really can't atone for the sins of those assholes in the past. You just have to do your best to have a liberal society now.
Exactly.
But that said, the Indians did get so screwed over that them getting any kind of revenge is awesome usually,
Yeah.
Especially if this is the actual person who did it too.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go, exactly.
And I do love when the tomahawks crash through the door, and I was thinking that a bunch of Native American zombies were going to come crashing through the door or something, but it's sort of this blob, right?
Yeah. Well,
it's basically this blob that's made up of the spirits, but it's a blob. That's how he describes it.
Well, it has shining, malevolent eyes, is one of the things that it says. Yeah. But yeah, it's an inky black thing, but it uses a tomahawk.
Yeah. I would love to see that monster.
Yeah.
I just imagine that it's sort of a big, rolling jello ball with feathers coming out of it, and then, a lot of arms and eyes and tomahawks. Oh, it'd be so cool.
Yeah, it's a very cool description because it flows over the table and under it, and it comes after this guy.
Yeah, and the floor gives way. So our protagonist, he falls down into another floor in the building. He sees the blob slide past him, and he tries to get out the front door, but he can't get out the front door, so he has to break a window.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the blob is going after the old man, and does it absorb him or does it eat him up? I don't remember.
I don't think it says. I think he just falls through. No, it doesn't. You don't see. No, he just gets away.
Yeah, he falls through and he gets away. And it's when he gets out into the alley, he sees it's not as ancient and colonial as he remembers either.
No.
So this is, again, kind of a Music of Eric Zahn thing where not only is this magic going on in the house with the guy, but the whole area is somehow in this magic enchanted place.
Right.
That doesn't really exist. I guess it's the ghost of old New York that he was referring to earlier in the story.
Right, yeah.
Of course, he faints, and somebody finds him all beat up with broken bones.
Yep.
So that's that typical, device of, I don't know what happened in the end. I just woke up, somebody found me, and they told me this.
Well, not just a broken bones, but a trail of blood.
Oh, right, like he crawled away.
Like he crawled from a place from some place, yeah. No, which is pretty gruesome.
It is gruesome, it's neat. And he concludes,
I never sought to return to those tenebrous labyrinths, nor would I direct any sane man thither if I could. Of who or what that ancient creature was, I have no idea. But I repeat that the city is dead and full of unsuspected horrors. Whither he has gone, I do not know. But I have gone home to the pure New England lanes, up which fragrant sea winds sweep at evening.
And that's the end of the story.
And that is the end of the story. So obviously we didn't like it. Obviously neither of us liked it that much, but
no,
it is interesting to be doing it now. I mean, this isn't the only story that he'd written in New York. Horror at Red Hook was in New York, and he'd written The Shunned House there as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But really, this of all of the stories really betrays his personal feelings about New York and about that move.
Yeah, I'm also obviously I've just gone through a move, and so I'm moving to a new area. And Chad, you've made major moves in your life too.
Sure,
from the Midwest to California.
Yeah, and we and we're sort of making fun of him for the way he feels, and I'll continue to do that. But I could kind of understand it to an extent. I mean, when I moved from the Midwest to California, it was a big change in the character of the places.
Right.
And it's funny, I think sometimes when you move, you contrast everything in the new place to how everything used to be.
Oh, right.
Now, clearly, you moved away from there, so you couldn't have liked it that much. But for a long time, when I lived in Los Angeles, I would say, "Oh, Angelenos, natives here, they don't get this and they don't get that, and they're so self-centered, and the whole world they think is here in Los Angeles." And that's not totally true,
Yeah, no.
I mean, people are people anywhere you go. I think it was what I was upset about was that they didn't know more about me, or they didn't know more about where I was from.
Sure.
Which is silly. Why should they?
Yeah. Well, just to be educated, maybe.
Well, no, I mean, I just mean, we all have to learn from one another, but you can't expect somebody to already, you know what I'm saying.
Even though I am actually quite impressed by how much about the United States the British people just generally know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's embarrassing as an American, when I'm talking to Europeans, because I don't know. I'm very prototypical American in that respect. I even read international sections of the paper, but I just feel like an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, can you even name one guy that's in Parliament?
James Bond.
No. See, there you go. And they know all about our senators, and
I think it's James. All right, well. Check up on that. I think James Bond.
Maybe James Bond might actually be in Parliament. Yeah. I won't. But I don't either. Is the point? I'm not trying to bust you. I have no idea who any of these people are in Parliament or anything like that. It's just England seems to be better than the United States.
Well, hey now, are we going to start having this conversation every week?
But back to the point. When you come to a new place, it's hard not to contrast it to the old one. And when things are different, you're going to want to just kind of fall back onto the way things were, and you'll lament the loss of knowing how things work.
Right. And some people hang in there and they get to know the new place that they're in, even though it's hard at first. And some people actually do just that. They say, screw this, and they get back to what they know.
Yep.
Which I'm not judging that, because maybe it takes moving away to figure out that you liked where you were.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's what happened with Lovecraft, right? I mean, he just wanted to be in Providence. He didn't want to be in these other parts.
No.
Yeah. Well, what you have some background on this story?
I do have some background on the story. It's kind of interesting. This little side fact here is this story was written, and we actually know the time of day that it was written, which was 7 a.m. on August 11th, 1925. And H.P. Lovecraft was basically out on an all-night tour of antiquities through New York. So he just started walking the city, not unlike the protagonists of the story, looking at old buildings and architecture and monuments and things like that. And he eventually, on his journey, he ended up getting on the ferry and crossing over to Elizabeth, New Jersey. And then in the morning, do
you think the theme to The Sopranos was playing as he was crossing over on the ferry into New Jersey?
I don't think the theme of The Sopranos was playing. No. But so anyway, he waited until this shop opened up, a bookshop, and bought a 10-cent composition notebook and wrote it.
Wow.
So there you go.
Wow. So he rocked it all night long, and then
again, this it kind of dispels a few myths I had about Lovecraft, about how he was just kind of a dandy sissy kind of guy, where he braves New York City all night. He just kind of stays up and walks and finds it interesting enough to do this adventure. It's kind of, I've never done anything like that, but I've never walked through a large city until the break of dawn into unknown regions. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
All right.
And the location of the story was actually in Greenwich Village in a courtyard off Perry Street. And Lovecraft found out that there used to be a mansion at that location, which built in the early 1700s, but then was razed in 1865. So when he was there, the mansion wasn't there, even though in the story he writes it as if it was. So,
right.
Again, Lovecraft taking bits of, actual history and trying to incorporate it into.
I tell you, I wish that there was I didn't like the story very much at all, but I wish that they would make a film adaptation of it at some point, just so I could see that moment when the man throws off of his cape and reveals his costume. I would pay cash money to see that actually happen on screen. What do we have coming up next week?
Next week we're doing a double header, which we haven't done for a while. We're doing The Vault and The Descendant. Or no, The Vault?
Yeah,
The Vault and The Descendant. In the Vault.
Sorry. In the Vault.
In the Vault and The Descendant.
I love In the Vault. I've read that one.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I like it quite a bit. It's a very much kind of it's almost like a Tales from the Crypt story or something like that.
Oh.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being patient with us as we switched the site over, as we took a week off, and with our recording today, because we're sort of experimenting with the new format and the new kind of arrangement. So
yes, hopefully all this will be worked out, and by the time we're done, you won't even notice that there's a difference between the old ones and the new ones, except maybe that they're slightly better.
Thank you again, Andrew Lehman, for voicing the story this week.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I also want to thank Troy for
Troy
his
Sterling
music.
Neese, yes. That gift of allowing us to use some of your music. We are going to be cashing in frequently in the future, so thanks to you again.
Thank you so much.
That really helps us out. And Mike J. Mann working on the site. Amazing job.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I love the new site. It looks great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, he did a really great job with it. And, we're working through these bugs. We'll be hopefully up to full speed soon enough.
And with that, I am Chad Pfeiffer.
And I'm Chris Lackey.
And this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com.
hppodcraft.com